Hey, have you noticed that neoliberal globalists like Justin Trudeau and Rishi Sunak are applauding Chinese protesters? Well done, stand up for freedom. Yet when there were protesters in their country, oh, you anti-vaxxers, you caused all these problems. And if they love protest so much, why are they quietly and slyly passing anti-protest laws? What have they got planned for your future? Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thank you for joining me on this voyage towards truth and freedom in all its complexity. If we do not unite now, we are going to be in serious trouble. For this is the quickening, where the forces against us align so plainly and clearly, offering us in opposition parties that are basically the same, not making any difference to the lives of ordinary people, trying to turn us continually against one another, tearing our culture apart and giving us empty ideals in its place. If you want to stand against it, you absolutely must subscribe and turn on the notifications on this channel so you get our content every single day. We are back on Rumble, streaming daily with great guests like Tim Robbins, MIA, Duncan Trussell, and many, many more joining us on the live show. There's a link in the description if you want to join us there. Now, let's get into today's crazy little story. You've noticed, of course, that in China, there are continual protests against the draconian lockdown measures. What you may be surprised by is that the Western media are now calling it a new Tiananmen Square. Look at them bravely standing up against authoritarianism. Hold on a minute. Don't you remember, like literally a couple of months ago, that when we protested in Canada or Britain or the United States, we were condemned as lunatics, as anti-vaxxers, as fools and maniacs? What exactly is going on here? Now, at best, I suppose they could advance the argument that the science has changed. Would they say that? Oh, we know more now about COVID. Then protesting was very dangerous and very foolish, although some protests were okay. Now, though, protests are good again. Oh, it seems almost like you just use these stories to advance a narrative that you're using to increase your ability to control the population, regardless of what values might underscore or underlie them. It seems we're living at a point where history is being immolated, ameliorated, entirely lost. Information is coming at us so thick and fast, we've got a collective amnesia. Just a couple of years ago, we were all locked down. These figures, such as Trudeau and Rishi Sunak, if you ask me, are the new faces of totalitarianism, masquerading as advanced, socially diverse, open and inclusive figures, when in truth and in fact, the authoritarianism that they demonstrate in their policies is more advanced than anything we've seen for 50, 60 years. And you know what I'm referring to back there. Let's have a look at this story in more detail. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Tuesday that everyone in China should be allowed to protest and express themselves. What about in Ottawa, though? No, not in Ottawa. Truck horns, that's noisy. No one needs to hear a truck horn near bedtime. That's when I'm applying my makeup for my latest parties.
Canadians are watching very closely. Obviously, everyone in China should be allowed to express themselves, should be allowed to share their perspectives and indeed protest.
Do you think for a moment there it crossed his mind, oh no, what about when I tried to introduce the Emergency Act so that I could arrest those truckers and shut down those protests, freezing bank accounts and shutting down donation sites? How are we supposed to live with this hypocrisy?
We're going to continue to ensure that China knows we'll stand up for human rights, we'll stand with people who are expressing themselves.
Do you think that maybe they stand up for human rights and the ability for people to express themselves if there are no political consequences for them? Are you beginning to think that that's what this movement is? We stand up for rights as long as all we have to do is sort of wear a badge or something. But if you have to change policies, if you have to interrupt the process, progress and agenda of powerful interest, we're not so interested. Is there a way we could just wear a badge? Anything beyond badges, they're not willing to do.
We also need to make sure that China and places around the world are respecting journalists and their ability to do their job. We'll continue to make that very clear.
You'll have seen in the mainstream press how much coverage there's been of Elon Musk's Twitter clear out, for example, how plainly and explicitly they explain to you the Hunter Biden stuff. And of course, the accountability of the media. We made so many mistakes during lockdown. We perhaps should have been a bit more circumspect circumspect. We were too willing to not hold Pfizer to account. It's weird, isn't it, in this cost of living crisis that energy companies are making billions. Weird that in a health crisis, pharmaceutical companies are making billions. Wow, it's almost like what's a crisis for ordinary people is an opportunity for the most powerful interests in the world. And like the government, instead of sticking up for ordinary people, actually support those interests. Where's those articles? Why are the mainstream media not writing them? Trudeau on Friday defended invoking emergency powers to end anti-government protests that paralysed the capital earlier this year, citing the threat of violence and lack of a credible plan by police. The threat of violence is another way of saying there could be violence, which is another way of saying there isn't any violence, which is another way of saying we're already in Minority Report. We're already in Orwellian territory. You looks to me like the kind of person that might do something violent, or worse than that, be a Nazi. Oh, really? Based on what criteria? Shut up! Shut down! Lock down! You cannot legislate on the basis of suspicion. That's a challenge to the most fundamental judicial principles of civilization. It's unraveling before our eyes. Trudeau portrayed the move to use emergency powers as unavoidable, saying it was not possible to negotiate with the protesters. So what's going on in China? Either both things are wrong or both things are right. Oh, China will support their rights, you know, the press, they should be reporting on it. What about the protests in Canada? No, I've got to shut that down, can't report on those, can't negotiate with them, they're too violent. Do you notice the algebra now? What you have to do is to say the people you oppose are impossible to negotiate with. They're either terrorists or they're anti-vax nutters. If you can legitimize their condemnation, then you simultaneously legitimize your own authoritarianism. Notice how often that happens. Oh, normally we wouldn't do this, but these people are racists, or normally we wouldn't do this, but these people are terrorists. What would we need to do in order to justify emergency powers? I don't know, say they're Nazis? Oh, but they're not Nazis. Yeah, it doesn't matter though, does it? Because if we say they're Nazis, that's the same as them being Nazis. It wasn't that they just wanted to be heard, they wanted to be obeyed, Trudeau told the Independent Public Commission looking into the government's use of the powers. I'm absolutely serene and confident that I made the right choice in agreeing with the invocation. In attempting to sound like sort of a new age wise politician, he's actually sounding like a psychopath, because many people felt serene and confident while they committed some of the worst atrocities in living memory. A state of personal serenity doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to deal with people you disagree with, to get in a conversation and say, look, I don't actually agree with anything you're saying, but given that this is a democracy and that idea transcends any individual and our hunches and our serenity and feelings we might have in our bones and our waters, I'm going to have to deal with you. I'm going to have to listen to you. Otherwise, when this stuff happens in China, I won't be able to say, oh, look at the Chinese authoritarianism there and people bravely standing up to it. So I'd sound like the worst kind of hypocrite.
That wasn't a usual political protest, from the intimidation and harassment of people for wearing masks to a very concerning story about folks disrupting the nearby homeless shelter and soup kitchen.
What petty vilification of the truckers. Right, okay, so we're here because we don't want to lose our jobs as truckers primarily, but also, let's stick it to that soup kitchen, man. Why have we got so many soup kitchens? Oh, because we impoverished everybody by closing down major industries, shaming people, insisting they had to have vaccines, otherwise they'd lose their jobs.
There were indications.
Indications? Oh, not evidence then. Yeah, just an indication, a suggestion, a whiff, an aroma, a scent.
That there was a level of disregard for others.
An indication of disregard for others is not sufficient to mobilise emergency laws. Wake up! Wake up! What is it? Is the house on fire? Is there a murder in here? No! There was an indication that some people might be showing a disregard for others. Ah!
Unfortunately, we had seen examples of during the election campaign, and it emphasized for me that this was the same kind of thing.
Same kind of, it's like a poem. It's not like proper legislation, law, order, all the institutions that have been established in Western civilization, which some people decry as patriarchy and some people celebrate as the proud foundations of a nation. But you can't just suddenly go, we've got indications and hunches and I felt not serene and that. These are not ways to run a country. Emergency! Emergency! Well, what is it? Oh, my knee's swelling up. It often does this when I need to evoke emergency powers. Trudeau cited the threat of serious violence and local police not having a credible plan to restore order as reasons that prompted him to invoke the Emergencies Act, which has not been used in its current form since it was created in the 1980s. Like his haircut. Civil liberties advocates argued police could have cleared the blockades using existing powers. Under Mr. Trudeau's decree, police had the authority to push back crowds on foot or with horses, use pepper spray, enter trucks and other vehicles by whatever means necessary and make arrests en masse. Thank God though, because there was an indication that there could or might be some hateful rhetoric. Also, a whole tin of soup was nearly spilled when a truck parked nearby. I take CBD. I, as a person in recovery, have to be very careful to take CBD that has no THC in it. That's the psychoactive component. Most people take CBD to help them with sleep, stress relief and staying relaxed, pain relief, especially after physical exercise, and to increase energy, focus and concentration. I take it in order to get some bloody good quality sleep at night. CB Distillery makes pure cannabidiol and CBD oil products, and they have over 2 million happy customers. 90% of their customers reported they sleep better with CBD. 81% says that CBD helps with stress. 80% said CBD helps with aches and pains after physical activity. Visit cbdistillery.com/Russell and enter my last name, which is Brand actually, B-R-A-N-D, for your discount. cbdistillery.com/Russell, promo code BRAND. For a good night's sleep and some stress-free times. Of course, you'll be aware of the blossoming neoliberalist bromance between our leader in the UK, Rishi Sunak, and Trudeau over there. All of these Davos graduates come together to celebrate in how kind and sharing and inclusive they are, particularly when imposing authoritarianism and condemning the authoritarianism of other nations who they openly emulate. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the so-called golden era of relations with China was over, warning that Beijing's move toward even greater authoritarianism posed a systemic challenge to Britain's values and interests. The old values and interests. What are your values and interests? Don't know, it depends what's convenient that day. Let's be clear, the so-called golden era is over. That's literally the first time I've ever heard of that golden era. Have you? I've always gone, I'm really enjoying this golden era with China, ain't you? When we can't pay for our fuel, when we can't afford food, I just bask in the golden light of the relationship with China. We recognise China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests, a challenge that grows more acute as it moves towards even greater authoritarianism, Sunak said in his speech at the Lord Mayor's banquet in London. Is that a banquet? Here at the Lord Mayor's banquet, we absolutely deplore inequality and elites lording it over an oppressed class, the way we did a couple of years ago, plainly, openly, where everyone could see it. Here at this lovely banquet, we believe that everyone should have rights and access to food. Get the fuck out there. Warmth. That we shouldn't have energy companies earning billions at a time of crisis. Can you turn the temperature? It's a bit hot in here. I can't enjoy my next turkey leg. You can't be at a Lord Mayor's banquet condemning authoritarianism. All they have is the garnish and accoutrement of democracy, the rhetoric of democracy. Our authoritarianism is just a different flavour. That's all. Oh, well, you wouldn't be able to do this video in China. Oh, well, thanks very much for pointing that out. That's it, is it? Well, you're allowed to complain about it here while we do nothing about it. In China, they might pepper spray you. They also do that in Canada. Listen, it's complicated, isn't it, politics? Instead of listening to their people's protests, the Chinese government has chosen to crack down further. How many lockdowns did we endure? How much condemnation? Where was the real science? Where was the truth? Where was the restriction of the profiteering of pharmaceutical companies, big tech giants? Where's the responsibility and culpability of the media? You better forget about China. You got work to do at home. A spokesperson for China's embassy in London said the UK was in no position to pass judgment on China's COVID policy or other internal affairs. Brilliant efficiency of language from China. What have you got to say about our condemnation? Doesn't seem really that it's any of your business or that you're any better. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak pledged that police will have whatever powers were required to crack down on disruptive protests. Well, that's amazing, isn't it? While condemning China, they are introducing new legislation to prevent protest here. Those people protesting in China, they're very, very brave and Chinese and irrelevant. These people protesting here, I don't think they're Chinese, but what they are is a pain in the arse. And that's why we're introducing new powers. Go on, China, keep protesting. Oi, you're under arrest.
This afternoon, I sat down with all the police chiefs to make it clear that they have my full support in acting decisively to clamp down on illegal protests.
Got to clamp down on the illegal ones. Legal protests, ones that don't do anything, that are irrelevant and are in China. Carry on with those, I support them. Illegal ones, ones that are here and are against my interests, check my bank account, check my marriage, check what my father-in-law does for a living and the connections to the WF. We don't want any of those protests.
It is completely unacceptable that ordinary members of the public are having their lives disrupted by a selfish minority.
Yeah, it's the ordinary members of the public. Like when I was running a hedge fund, me and the old ordinary members of the public were saying like, right, this Moderna thing that we're starting that's going to profit hugely over the next couple of years, how are we going to benefit most of all, ordinary members of the public? Oh, and I got fined during lockdown for being part of those parties. Do you remember that all the way through lockdown when they were having parties while you were doing funerals on YouTube and stuff? It was me and the old ordinary members of the public, other members of the government. Come on, use ordinary members of the public.
My view is that those who break the law should feel the full force of it, and that's what I'm determined to deliver.
It gets to a point where people like Justin Trudeau and Rishi Sunak should simply put themselves in prison and shut up, and they would have made the world a better and more effective place in alignment with the principles that they're continually espousing.
We are currently giving the police new powers so that they can clamp down on these illegal protests.
Giving the police new powers. There it is. That's moving towards a police state, advancing the powers of the police force. Do you remember voting? Do you remember being asked? No, me neither.
They will have my full support in acting decisively and rapidly to end the misery and the disruption that's being caused to ordinary families up and down the country who are trying just to go about their day-to-day lives.
The misery and disruption is not as a result of illegal protests. The misery and disruption is as a result of a lack of protests against the cost of living crisis, the corruption in government, the inability to clamp down and control the profiteering from globalist entities such as Big Pharma, Big Tech, protests against a media that will not report the truth to ordinary people. Can you not see that what we're witnessing now is a globalist agenda being asserted via national institutions such as the police force without democratic due process?
And I've said to the police, but whatever they need from government, they will have in terms of new powers. We're already giving them some, and I want to back them to use them.
Well, if you weren't terrified before, you should be terrified now. And allow that terror to spur you into action and activism. Allow it to push you beyond any sense of division between your fellow citizens. Recognise that they are your allies. Put the culture war to one side because there is a real war taking place. In October, a last-minute amendment to the Public Order Bill lets Home Secretary Suella Braverman apply for injunctions against anyone she deems likely to carry out protests. So during that time of chaos in British politics, where there was a new Prime Minister about every half hour, they put through a bill going, oh, but do you mind if the police arrest people for looking funny? Oh, yeah, do that. We're too busy watching the soap opera. The proposal would give police the power to arrest anyone they suspect to be breaching such an injunction. According to Liberty, the amendment will effectively give the Home Secretary the power to clamp down on protests as and when the government chooses. Oh, so next time there's a lockdown and you protest and they don't laud it like they do foreign protests, they will be able to arrest you there and then on the spot, just on the basis of suspicion. Other measures proposed in the bill include giving courts the power to issue serious disruption prevention orders, SDPOs, which can ban individuals from attending protests. Amnesty International said the proposed law would go further than similar legislation in Russia by giving courts the power to issue them without conviction. Without conviction. In this country, that we used to do stuff like that to suspected Irish terrorists. It led to the false imprisonment of numerous people, and it was one of the things we look back as a kind of dark ages policy, internment without conviction or without trial. It's being reintroduced with politicians like, well, obviously we just want to help everyone. We just want to be all kind and cozy. This is new authoritarianism. Worse than Russia, which we all know is the worst country that there's ever been. The range of conditions that can be imposed on individuals under the orders include 24/7 GPS monitoring and restricted internet usage. Already we're moving into the era of social credit scoring and totalitarian control. Police would be given powers to stop and search people or vehicles even if they have no reasonable grounds to do so, if a senior officer believes believes protest offences are likely to take place in an area. So there you have it. When there were protests in this country, they were condemned. Protests in China are applauded. Protest laws are being introduced in countries across the West in order to prevent us ever protesting again, even though they applaud it in China, yet we're supposed to forget we took on a Chinese model of authoritarianism to introduce and implement the lockdowns that we've only just gotten through. Do not succumb to this amnesia. Keep your memory alive. Remember what's going on. Stay awake, stay present, and more important than anything, stay free. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. Remember, turn on the notification bell and subscribe because you know that algorithm's against us, baby. We've got to keep you informed. And remember, we're on Rumble every day. These videos are there in full, first, and for free. See you there. Stay free.